speak with the guys at all anymore in Triumph at all? You speak with Mike and Gil, check in with them?
All the time with Gil, because he's got a bee in his bonnet about wanting to do this heavy duty 3D hologramish, like he wants Triumph to go back and do a tour, not the guys in the band, but like screen projection.
Yeah, that's the next wave of stuff. That's what a lot of people are looking at.
And he wants to have a band that would have Phil X sort of putting the musicians together so that there would be a live band, but then we would be joining them by playing on the screens and, and just all this incredible stuff. And he's sending me scripts. And so he was supposed to call me this afternoon and he got too busy. But yes, I talk to Gil all the time. Mike, not so much. And he's been down in Jamaica as he does every winter.
He's got the right idea.
Yeah, so
enough, respect us enough, and the fans demand us enough. I don't know that they ask us back, and we've been doing that for a long time. I think the first time we did the cruise was way back in, I want to say 2011, 12, something like that.
Yeah, definitely. And you guys, I think you just dropped a new video just today for the album, for the Greatest Gift of All album, just dropped, right?
We did, man. It's a song called On This Holy Night. It's very dark musically, and the video's kind of dark. It's got a lot of Halloween imagery. AI, of course, it's the only way you can do stuff like that these days. And we're kind of mixing the Halloween imagery with Christmas and Jesus, images of Christ and what Christmas has become, in our opinion. Like so many times on products you buy, it literally says Xmas. It doesn't say Christmas. It's like, I feel like so often Christ is taken out of Christmas, which is what Christmas should be all about. And, this video kind of addresses that in a unique way, a little bit of a dark way. But that's what we're all about. We wanted to release it on Halloween. And the whole point of that is, Jesus owns Halloween as well.
I'm sure Pete Evick and I will be spooning again one day.
I totally understand.
I'm kidding. I
got a few follow-up questions for you, maybe. So maybe not exactly speaking to those points, but folks kind of want to know, is the communication still good between yourself and the rest of the boys?
I talk to Cece all the time, at least once or twice a week. And his mom and my mom were really close, and my mom passed away, and his mom's going through a lot right now, and that's kept us close on one level. I talk to Bobby less. Bobby keeps to himself a lot these days, which is okay if that's how he. Bobby can't help himself but to talk about business, and sometimes he doesn't want to talk about business, so he just doesn't want to pick up the phone. You know what I mean? But Brett and I do not talk, unfortunately. And that's a shame. Honestly, it is. So we get bits and pieces of stuff. I'll set the record straight as far as Poison touring. At this point in time, there is nothing on the books for a 2026 40th anniversary tour. And I said it months ago that when we got presented a contract from Live Nation to go on tour, Cece, Bobby, and I agreed. We thought it was great. We thought the money was great. We thought the lay of the land looked great. And then Brett looked at it and has not agreed to anything. So literally, that is where we're at. I'm not trying to bash Brett or to do any. I'm not trying to start.
Right. We're not looking for that. We're just looking for from the fan standpoint, because they get bombarded with all this fake stuff. Let's just have the folks here that are involved with it. I mean, this is your livelihood. This is your business. People think it's like a brotherhood in a band, but it's everybody working together, and it's your business, it's your livelihood. Dokken was also part of the Monsters of Rock tour in '88. Obviously, that summer with Van Halen, Scorpions, Metallica, and Kingdom Come. Just a huge tour package. Was that really stressful for the band? What are your memories of that?
I thought it would be like a lot of competition and all that. But as it turned out, we all just got along. I mean, everybody just did. I think it was healthy because there's all these great bands on one bill. It had never been done before. We were playing stadiums for like 100,000 people, and we all got along great. That's what's cool. There was no he's louder than me, and I want to be louder than him, and so it was all pretty professional. But it was a huge undertaking with all those bands. I think we had 5, 6 semi trucks, the lighting, the PA. Oh man, it was a big to do, financially. And I think they did a couple after that, but that was the one that everybody went to, that remembers if it's when you were young.
Yeah,
Now
I was one of those young
older.
folks out there watching you guys jam it out here in Buffalo, New York area. Just an amazing show. All the bands sounded amazing that day for sure.
I mean, to buy a ticket to see that, Scorps and Van Halen, and I miss Eddie. That's a bummer. We all miss Eddie. And, and I know the Scorpions from Germany, they were friends of mine, so it all worked out really good. The only thing I didn't really like, that Metallica went on before us. And I told my manager I'd rather go on after them.
Right.
And he goes, well, you're getting paid more money, you're more famous.
Right.
At that time, we were more famous.
Right.
They hadn't put out the Black Album. That's the one that took them over the top,
Right. Exactly.
Now they're the biggest band in the world, but when they go on before us, it's kind of hard to compete with Metallica, I say. It's kind of like opening up for God,
Yeah, they were on their way up at that point for sure, right?
They were right in that, they were in the zone, very committed. They kind of kept to themselves. I didn't see them much, even in the hotels. But when you listen to that record, I wish I would have written it because our album was good. But to me, that album, the Black Album, every single song was good. There were no bad songs. And here we are, talking about it decades later, and everybody's got their Metallica Sundays and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was good. It was hard because we played 3 or 4 shows in Texas, and we're playing outdoors, and it was about 108, 110 today. It was really, really hard to stand there sweating, and it was brutal. That's all I can say. It was brutal.
Yeah, I remember the show, like I was saying, in the Buffalo area. It was very, very hot that day, and they were hosing down the audience like they used to do back in the day a little bit. Yeah, just extremely hot, but an amazing tour, definitely.
And we knew that, we had to go 100% no matter what. I mean, I think there's always competition with other bands, but yeah, the good thing was that we all got along, If something happened and other bands' amp blew, they grabbed somebody else's amp, and little things like that. But yeah, like I said, you were in New York, Texas, for some reason there was an unseasonably crazy heat wave during that whole tour.
It was just super hot. Yeah, no doubt. Well, I also wanted to chat with you. You guys have definitely had your share of ups and downs in Dokken. Even releasing an album called Dysfunctional in '95.
Yeah.
Why do you think the working environment broke down in the band? What do you think that was?
Check this. Do you guys have this in Europe or New York? It's called Liquid Death. Looks like a beer.
I think I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just it's just sparkling water with flavoring. No sugar, no nothing. They're pretty cool. I think the relationship mostly was just drugs were involved in the tour. I didn't personally take drugs, but it seemed like my band was on drugs. The road crew was on drugs. Other bands' crews were on drugs. And I was kind of just oblivious to the whole thing. I was just trying to focus on the show and get some sleep and, long drives in a bus. And people, we got testy, but George and I kind of never got along from the first record. Things are better now. He's coming to play. He's playing with us in 3 days in St. Louis. And we get along. When you get older, you get mellower.
Yeah, definitely have a different perspective on things. So we should say, sure, definitely for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I kept thinking, the more famous we get, the more money we're making, maybe the more people would chill out in the band, but they didn't.
Right.
George always wanted to do his own thing. I think Jeff Pilson always wanted to be a singer. And Mick was just like, well, you guys work it out.
Right.
But, and in fact, that's when we broke up. On the last show of Monsters of Rock was in Mile High Stadium. And then we did the show. And after that, we had a meeting with the record company. We said, we're done.
And so this guy from the record company called me, said, Doro, would you like to go to the release party of Ronnie James Dio's new album? And I said, oh, I would love to. So I went to the release party in New York and I saw Ronnie and then, I told him that the record is awesome. And, I'm so happy to see him. And he said, Doro, I always want to tell you, I love your version of Egypt, the Chains Are On. I did a cover version of Egypt, the Chains Are On, and I think it came out really nice. And he said, I love it. I always play it on the radio and stuff. And I said, really? So we were talking and he gave me a hug and we had a great time. It was a great party. So a couple of weeks later, I did some interviews for my new album, Calling the Wild. And the lady said, do you have any touring plans and stuff? And I said, well, we want to do either a club tour or support somebody. And she said, what would be your dream band to support? And I immediately said, Ronnie James Dio. And she said, you know what? That is so unbelievable because Ronnie is calling me up in 2 hours and we have another interview for his new album, Magica. And I said, really? And she said, shall I ask him? And I said, okay. I said, why not? I wouldn't, I didn't dare to ask. And she said, you know what? I asked him. So he told Ronnie about it. And she said, well, Doro has a new album coming out. And how about you guys go on tour together? And Ronnie said, yes. So a couple of months later, we went on tour together in America. It was a long tour. Yngwie Malmsteen was there as well. And we were the best friends. We went out to eat day and night talking. Ronnie always loved Indian food, so we always tried to get some Indian places, and when we had a day off, then we talked till 6 o'clock in the morning. It was so cool. And then we started in San Francisco, the tour, and we ended in Florida. And actually the last 3 concerts. And we got along so great. And then I was always watching every concert, on the side of the stage with the guys in my band. And then one time, Ronnie left the stage. And I said, oh, okay, that's unusual. And the guys in my band, they were patting me on the back. And I said, you're on. And I said, no. And then Ronnie came back with 2 microphones. And then he came over to me and he handed me the second microphone. He said, okay, Doro, let's do the encores together. And I said, Ronnie, I don't really know the lyrics exactly. He said, doesn't matter. And then we sang arm in arm together with the fans. We sang all the encores, all the big hits. And yeah, the last 3 gigs in Florida. And it was so cool. And unfortunately, nobody recorded it because people didn't have a cell phone with the camera. I got some photos, but I didn't get any videos. Maybe somebody from your listeners has some video footage of it. But we had such a great time. So, and Ronnie was the sweetest. He was so sweet. And he had such a great sense of humor too. We were sometimes rolling on the floor laughing. He was super funny, and we became great friends. And
I've always heard that he was very, very, very kind to, and especially to his fans. He always seemed to take the time with them when a lot of other artists kind of don't, and they don't realize that. He seemed to always take that time and be a very personable type of person. Yeah. And I heard he didn't like Indian food at first, but then when he started eating it, That was it.
That's right. And yeah. It was a fantastic tour, and and he always came to our tour bus and hanging out, and it was fantastic, and man, we had the best time, and actually we had plans to do another tour together, and then it didn't come to that anymore. So it would have been a dream of mine to do another duet with Ronnie James Dio on a record, but so maybe in another lifetime. And
Right, yeah, such an amazing rock icon he was, definitely.
Yes.
And he was always a very, very sharp dresser. He always had his stage and his outfits just so. And your stage clothes, what I was reading, are handmade.
Yes.
Those are handmade for you. I didn't realize that at first.
Yes, they're handmade, and actually, that's probably 25 years ago. I started to not use real leather anymore, and because of the animals, I wasn't, I didn't think about it before, but when I heard that it's so cruel, like, how they produce the leather things and stuff, and I thought, oh man, I love animals, and I don't want to have anybody suffer for my little leather jacket. So I started to check into that, and everything I always wear is all like artificial leather, fake leather. The gloves as well, and some fans, they make the best stage clothes. So some of the diehard fans, this one is actually from Australia. They're like these leather gloves, but they are not real leather. And her name is the band's name is Matterhorn, actually an Australian band, but the band's name is Matterhorn. And and she's doing my the jackets, everything. And I have a German fan, her name is Julia, and she's doing pants and stuff. And sometimes I'm doing my own stuff as well, but it's all like, it's not real leather. And and I became a vegan. I know many people don't understand that, but I think it's, like, because I love animals.
We talked to him a little bit about, back in the day, playing the Monsters of Rock tour, things like that, and the breakdown in communication that obviously happened with the band. What's your feelings around that? What do you think kind of was the spearhead that kind of said enough's enough here at this point?
Breakdown? No breakdown communication. No, there was no, the truth of the matter is, and I've said this many, many times, and I'm not saying it in any kind of, disparaging way, but the fact is that Don really wanted to control everything and have the lion's share of the money. And that's really what it all came down to. When you boil it down to its, foundational element, most basic thing, that's what he was trying to accomplish. So, and he let us know that, and he got his own separate management, and then he had his own separate record deal, and he was trying to fire us, but we couldn't do that. He couldn't do that because we all owned the band. He disbanded the band or whatever, or left or whatever. He tried to fire us, but he couldn't do that. So he just started his own thing and then sued us. So we countersued, and the end result was nothing. Everybody just went their own way, I guess.
Went their separate ways. Yeah. So,
but really, everybody lost, but, Don, we all did okay. We've all done wonderful things and very satisfying and gratifying musically. But
Jeff has gone on. He's playing with Foreigner and doing shows with them and doing tons of other projects.
Jeff's doing arguably better than any of us at this point on that level. But but what we all gave up was the sure thing, which was what we had all worked for, which was we did the build. We did it the right way with the help of our incredible management, Q Prime, Cliff Bernstein and Peter Mensch at Q Prime, who managed, Queensryche, Metallica, and even the Rolling Stones and, other huge bands at the time. And we had that power, of that whole machine guiding us. And we did the right records all at the right time. The timing was perfect. And on a wonky business level, everything was primed for us to pretty much turn the corner. So that's what every professional musician wants, kind of at our level is to get to that point where you have this negotiating power with the labels and promoters and others, but especially the labels, to have leverage to where you get the deal. And those deals last for many, many years. And then you go to another level, financially, security, music security. I mean, you have a home and you're going to be established, and it's going to carry you through the rest of your life. And that's the point we worked towards. And we were on the cusp of signing that deal with Warner Brother Elektra. Don didn't want to. I had insisted that all throughout the band's career, when we were in TAC, I was insisting that we be 4 for 1, 1 for all, quarter splits on everything, regardless of who wrote what, regardless of anything. I wrote the most music. I had the most. I suffered the most for that, if you want to call it suffering. But I gave up the most, and I still believed in that, because I thought you get the best results that way, because you're letting the people that are contributing the most important music, you're letting them do that, and you're not forcing people that are contributing inferior music to feel compelled to insist on their contribution musically to the album because they want to make more money. This way, you're paying the weaker writers to stay home, and they get just as much money. And I thought that was a good idea. And plus, it was just fair. We'd all been out there on the road for 10 years, busting our ass. We all came up from the same place. We all played together in the garages and the kegger parties and the sock hops, and we all did our time. So just because one of us has got the last name, or one of us has more talent or identifiable style or something, isn't the other person shouldn't suffer for that. So I was very comfortable with that, and Don was not. And that was our problem. That was his problem with me. I didn't have a problem with him, other than the fact that he wasn't comfortable with being fair and sticking to the plan, and the agreement that we all worked under for those 10 years. And then when it came time for the big payday that we all worked for, he wanted to take it all and pretty much kick us to the side, off to the side. And it's not what good people do, what I'm saying? So I lost a lot of respect for him, and I fought him on that. And, here we are today. So Dokken could have been, a much bigger band, could have been on the Motley Crue level, and then like that, Bon Jovi level, which is a whole other level,
Well, if it wasn't for Yngwie Malmsteen being there, there'd be no band. I'm telling you, because we looked around for, I don't know how long, months, for a guitar player. And when he came along, it was like, who is this guy? He walks into we had an audition. So he walks into the audition, and he's wearing the clothes that Richie Blackmore would wear. The spandexy things with the white boots and stuff, tie up here, all that stuff. And he looked like he was going on stage. And we said, like, God, you look like Richie. He said, I'm a big fan of Richie. So anyway, before he came in, I said to him before he came into the audition, I said to him on the phone, can you learn something that isn't Rainbow? And I gave him a track off of my album, a song called SOS that Russ Ballard wrote. And I said, can you learn that so we can play it, go through that with him? Because I wanted to hear what he played like without all the all that, all the widdly widdlies. Yeah. And he played the shit out of it. It was so good. I said, I've never heard it played like that before. That was amazing. And I said to him, should we do some Rainbow stuff now? Yeah, all right then. So he comes up and plays the Rainbow stuff like I've never heard it played before. He was so eager. He was so hungry. And he was like 19 years old. And he was the guy to take. But without him, I don't think the band would have been where it got to,
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it was an outstanding show. I've seen, your brother play quite a few times with Dokken. Obviously, the Monsters of Rock tour was a real big tour for them. I seen them open for Aerosmith on the Permanent Vacation tour. Just some outstanding stuff. And I just spoke to George, I think it was last week, about the stuff that he's got going back out on tour. So excellent stuff for Dokken.
Yeah, I think I did see that George was on your show. Yeah.
Yeah, he was great. Such a great guy. Such a talented and humble dude.
Was it the George where he was out running errands at Costco while he was doing the interview with you?
No, he
Okay.
started it out. He really kind of threw me for a loop, and it was good because it set a funny tone, right? So he's like, you mind if I work out while we're doing this? I'm like, well, he's like, I kind of like to multitask. I'm like, okay, yeah. I mean, I get that. I'm that way too. I try to do that. He's like, well, I usually work out in the nude. I'm like, well, I don't know if we can do that. You know, I might have to put a bar across the screen, but I told him, I'm like, folks might dig that, but kind of they may not too.
Well, I remember we did an End Machine interview with was George and Jeff and I all at the same time, and so it was the split screen thing. So Jeff and I are like this, and I'm in a hotel somewhere on the road, and so was Jeff. But but George was in his car half the time, and all you saw was like the side of his head or out the window, or and he's in Costco and he's talking to his wife, and we're like.
Right. Yeah. I didn't know what was going to happen with that one. He kind of, I talked to him about 2 years ago. He was working on a different project and he was playing his guitar the whole time. And I get that. Usually that's what guitar players are doing, during the interview,
Well, yeah, he's not happy unless that part of his brain's being occupied too, But I mean, I tell people all the time too, I've known him since I was 4, and I met Jeff Pilson when I was probably 11 or 12. And, as a matter of fact, the Cow Palace was the first time I met Jeff Pilson. And, yeah, I mean, 4 years old.
Right.
That's a long time ago. And he has always been exactly like he is now.
Yeah.
The sense of humor never changed. You always got to kind of check him twice to see if he's serious or not.
Right. That's what threw me at first
too.
That's what threw me at first too. I'm like, oh, he's got like a dry sense of humor. You don't know how to take him until you've talked to him a little bit. Right.
And you never know, like when he said the nude thing, you're like, ha ha ha. But I would still be like, hey, I wouldn't be surprised if.
Right. I'm just like, I just want to talk to you. If you need to do that, all right, I'm not holding you up.
Yeah, man. I get it.
Oh, funny stuff, man. So obviously, you're big influence your brother for
Absolutely.
your, for the most part, growing up, seeing all that. What other drummers have influenced you? I'm sure there's a laundry list of all the great folks,
There is, and every time I do this, I always, after I make a list of like these, guys and why or whatever, I always think of 5 more after, and then I'm just mortified that I didn't mention this. But I think, I can answer it like this. I think the 3 really big, the most life-changing moments were the one that we talked about at the Cow Palace. And look at, and those guys are still, I mean, obviously my brother's my biggest influence, of course. And he's older than I am, so we never got to play together.
Right. That's what I was thinking. Like the Peace Brothers do that. I'm like, too bad you guys couldn't do that,
Yeah, well, I wanted to do that at one time. And then Nick said to me, like, Steve, who would come see that?
Oh, people would come to. People would come see that.
But those guys. Basically, that show that I was talking about earlier was Leonard Hayes and Vinny Appice, and they remain my favorite, guys today. And I was telling Jeff Pilson while we were doing one of the End Machine things that like Vinny is still like my favorite, like out of all those things. And I'm pretty much sure that it had to do with that moment, and that changed everything for me. But there was something about the way, everyone has something, Vinny's got such a great feel and everything. And then, you had Leonard, and man, he had such a great feel and his foot was so amazing and all those things. So those were huge influences right from the get-go. But, there was times when, when I was 16, I went on the road with Dokken for a week, and they were opening for Loverboy. And there was only a couple times that my brother and I really had conversations about drums or drummers, and because that age gap was so big, he was,
right.
I forgot how old he was when I was 16, but I don't want to do that math. But I mean, there was a big gap. And so, this time in our lives, we're both kind of adults.
Right.
So we get to talk about it a little bit more, and it's a little bit more fun. But he would take me up like to see the drummer for Loverboy and point out things that he thought was amazing about it. And you know what? I soaked all those things in like a sponge. I mean, they were really, really great. but we had generational gaps where I would say, oh man, I really like this drummer. And it was like a friend of his or something. And he would be like, but what about, Ginger Baker or something like that. And
the big names. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you're, 14, 15, 16 years old, it's like, I don't want to listen to that at that time,
Right.
And then you grow up a little bit and you're like, oh God, I missed this whole genre of stuff, And I don't know if it's like that for drummers. I know guitar players are a little bit different. They tend to, dip into the well going back. But I mean, those were just things that were in front of me at the time and that influenced me, and that I was seeing and being a part of because he was a part of it. So, that was kind of where that went.
yeah, I can understand that. And for a lot of folks, I think it depends on where they're at in their life, what music means to them at that point in their life, what they're listening to, what's popular. And like you said, then a lot of times you go back, right? You go back in history and you look at all these other people that came before, like John Bonham and Ginger Baker and these big names. And you're like, oh, now I know where some of these people got some of their style or some of their sound or maybe even stole a little bit of something from them, right?
Right. That is so true. When I went back in speaking of Vinny and being a fan of, Vinny Appice and then listening to Carmine and then going back and then the John Bonham thing, of course, that's going to be the hugest influence,
Right.
And when you get back into those things, then yeah, you're exactly right. You see exactly where you see the transition and the growth of the years, that it goes through from there, that those people were influenced by that. And of course now they're influencing me. And so that's a cool thing. I love it.
And I think the one other thing that's interesting about that too is there's some artists, whether it be a drummer or guitarist, whatever, you can identify them by just hearing them play. They'll have a style or they'll have a sound like when it's George Lynch playing something, right?
Absolutely.
You can hear that. When it's Vinny playing something. You can hear that style, you know what I mean? It's very recognizable,
Yeah, and that's such a great that's a great thing to have for any player, when you can listen to a song or listen to something and who especially when it's the drummer,
right.
And you go, oh, well, I know who that is,
Right. I'm sure you can pick that all the time. Definitely. So another question I had for you, what's your typical drum setup look like? Drummers always want to know that, they want to know what your setup usually is. You have preferred brands?
It looks like this. I'm actually in the recording studio right now. It looks mainly like this, and with Tesla, I have another one of these floor toms. But yeah, I mean, I kind of keep it to the Bonham setup, and most of the time with 2 floor toms and 1 rack tom and a bass drum and a snare drum, and a few cymbals.
Some of the other stuff I was reading here in your book I thought was kind of interesting. When you guys started the Van Halen tour, their management came to you and advised against you doing any of the two-handed tapping thing, as they were saying. They were saying this was Eddie's thing, but then I think I read Ed approached you later on. He says, like, no, you play what you want.
Right. Well, what happened was, it was after the show we played and they played, and so I was backstage in this little practice room, and I saw Eddie walking by. I said, "Hey, Eddie, come here." And I said, "What's the beef about, me playing two-handed?" I said, "I wrote a book about this in '78 before I'd ever even heard of you. I was fresh in LA and everything, going to the Guitar Institute." And I showed him the book and everything, and he goes, "Oh, wow," and I showed him how to play it and all that. And so we started talking, and then, it was their tour manager that told me I couldn't be playing that because that's Eddie's thing, and I'm going.
He was trying to make a big buzz with that at the time.
Yeah,
for sure.
And so I asked the tour manager when he said it. I said, "Well, can I use my pick, or is that Eddie's thing too?" I mean, really, come on.
Right.
I got strings on this guitar. Can I use those? It's like, come on, everything's not somebody else's. Everybody had. There's so many people that had done that tapping technique before. I don't like playing to it, and Eddie didn't either.
Right. People showed you how to do it. You were saying that earlier. Other people had shown
exactly. you. Yeah, so it wasn't a new thing. There were people doing it for decades, and so I told Eddie what the tour manager had said, and then Eddie said, "Look at me, I don't care what you play. Go ahead." So we just hit it off from there, and everything was good.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, so I was also reading your distinctive two-handed fretboard tapping technique won you the Guitar Solo of the Year award for Guitar Player magazine in '85, and you conducted 325 guitar clinics in 20 countries. Is that right?
That was after Autograph split up in 1989 because we finished our deal, the 3 albums with RCA, and we were going to do another 3 albums for Epic Records. We were going to sign with them because they loved our demos of the new material and everything. It was a little bit harder edged and a little bit more raw. But the thing is everybody was looking at Seattle for the whole grunge thing because that was just coming in and just wiping out the whole 80s thing. And,
right.
And like 80, 89, 1990. And it did. I mean, it completely wiped it out, basically. Just one day the 80s were in, and the next day the whole Seattle grunge thing was in the 90s. And so that was it. And so Epic told us that, we really can't sign you because, there's nothing that we can really do with you because nobody's signing 80s bands anymore. And we understood, we could see it happening from what was being played on the radio. And so we disbanded at the end of the 80s, December of 1989. And that's the very end of the 80s. And right. So at that point, I thought, well, I have this opportunity where I had done some clinics for St. Louis Music and to promote my books as well. And so I signed on with them and ended up doing 325 clinics. And it was such a great experience, traveling around to all these countries. And I was surprised. I didn't think that outside of America, nobody knew who I was or knew who Autograph was. And I was really pleasantly surprised that, everybody was showing up.
That song was getting played everywhere, man.
Yeah.
I remember when that hit and that came out, I had your poster on my walls back in the day.
Yeah.
That was playing everywhere, man.
Yeah. And it was in heavy rotation on MTV and all that. And so
yep.
I just had no idea, but these guys that were showing up at the guitar clinics, they were, well, can you sign this? And they had all 3 of our albums and they had my instructional books already and everything. So going, wow, what a pleasant surprise that, I didn't think anybody knew my name over there, but yet, I was pretty popular. And so I was taken aback by that. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, they got to meet one of their guitar heroes, and you've gotten to meet a couple different one of your guitar heroes.
Oh, yeah.
You got to meet Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page. Some amazing stories for that. Tell us a little bit about Jeff Beck. I thought that was great.
Oh, yeah. Jeff Beck, I saw him play with Beck, Bogart, and Appice. I think it was 1970 at the Paramount Theater in Seattle. And I was only 15 years old. And so I went there and with the full intention of getting a guitar pick from Jeff, because he was my favorite at that time. I loved Hendrix and Jimmy Page too, but at that time I was really getting into Jeff Beck. And this is when he was playing, like I said, with Beck, Bogart, and Appice. And so anyway, after the show, he was having a lot of trouble with his equipment and everything. It was breaking down. He walked off stage, threw his guitar and everything, because it was ridiculous. His amps were really acting up, and he was having a terrible time. And so anyway, I waited outside, just pouring down rain. I was freezing my butt off, and I saw there was one limo still left. So I figured the other limo that probably had Carmen Appice and Tim Bogart in it had already left. So I thought this one's got to be Jeff's. And so sure enough, they came out from that backstage door, and there was Jeff, in an argument with his tour manager because they had so many equipment failures. And so anyway, he started walking towards his limo, and my friend kind of pushed me. He said, go, because I was really scared to go up and ask him, because I knew he had a really bad night.
Right.
And so
maybe not the best time to ask.
Yeah. And so, yeah, exactly. I thought he was just going to say, get the hell out of my face, or something. But
right.
But he looked at me, and he could see that I was shivering and I'm soaking wet. And he said, get in the back, mate. So he opened up the door, and I got in the back of the limo with him, and he said, here, let me see what I got here. Because I asked him for the guitar pick, and he was, rummaging around through his Pan Am flight bag, and he found a guitar pick for me, and he says, here you go, take this one. It was a Herkel Heavy. And he gave it to me, and he patted me on the back, and I got out. And he said, good luck to you, mate. I think you're going to go far with this, And so I just went, because he could see my determination just to get a guitar pick, So he thought, this kid's probably going to make it. And so, or at least to some degree. And so I took that pick and I played with it for years and years and years. I wouldn't play with anything else. And I wore it down to a nub, to the point where you couldn't even use it anymore. It was just, completely gone. And so I carried it around in my hip pocket as a good luck charm. And then 15 years later, AMP show, 1985, I saw Jeff backstage. He was supposed to go on to perform, but he couldn't because he had a broken thumb. And Roger Fisher from Heart was there. He had just designed a new guitar that he had with LED lights going up and down the neck and everything, and a little amp built into it. And he handed it to Jeff and wanted Jeff to play it. And he says, he's had this broken thumb with this big steel thing on it, all taped up and all that. And so Jeff handed it to me. And then I just kind of went, I started playing around with some of the two-handed technique. He looks at me, he goes, "What the hell, man? How do you do that?" So I showed him a couple of things, and he wasn't able to play, but he got what I was talking about, the way I was explaining it, and so he said, "That's really cool. That's what I'm going to use some of that actually." And so then I got out my pick from my hip pocket. I still had it, and there was this little nub, and I said, "You gave this to me outside of the Paramount Theater in 1970. It was pouring down rain." And he went, "Oh my God, you're that kid." He said, "I've told this story." I thought he would never remember it.
Right, because they meet all kinds of people.
Right, yeah. But for some reason that story stuck out to him, and he remembered me. And so he said, that was you? And I go, "Yeah, absolutely. And this is the pick you gave me." And he looked at it, and I handed it to him, and I said, "I want you to have it back," and his eyes welled up with tears. So of course mine did too. And everybody that was right back in that perimeter backstage they did too. They thought it was, wow, what an incredible story.